Dave, welcome. Do I call you Coach Morris? Do I call you Mr. Morris? Do I call you Athletic Director Morris, Professor Morris? You seem to have a lot of titles. What do we call you?
I've had a lot of different names. Actually, when I got more into being a professor, I like that, and it's a very respected name, but I always miss not being called coach, actually. And so I kind of like it when some people do call me coach, so that'll be fine. But you can call me any of them.
All right, we'll call you coach for this then. Great.
Right.
Well, David's the author of Student Athletes Control Your Destiny, a book that's not just about sports, but how to navigate the balance between school, athletics, and life. Dave, you've seen student athletes across generations, from the pre-social media days to now, where every move is public. When you look at today's athletes, what's the biggest shift in what they're balancing?
Now, there's been a tremendous shift, and when I started teaching and coaching back in the late 70s, I hate to admit how old I am, but I always had the philosophy that academics was number one, and then to try to get kids to realize that, and then athletics, and then help prepare them for life. But the biggest thing that I've seen from all the last 40 years of being in education is the shift and the focus on things, and I just feel like the expectations have changed so much. I think a long time ago, most parents and most people realized that things should be kept in perspective, but now over the last 20, 30 years, there's so many more expectations and demands put on student athletes to perform, not only that they put on themselves, but by their parents and by coaches and by other people, that I think, as a society, it's just created a lot more challenges for student athletes. And then, as you mentioned, with the social media becoming such a big part of it, and everybody knows everything that's going on, it's even added more pressure and more, demands and higher expectations.
Yeah, the realistic aspect of it is something that I really appreciate you commenting on. At the end of the day, if I'm 5'6" and a male, I'm probably not going to play in the NBA. Earl Boykins, Spud Webb, Muggsy Bogues, we can name the people that did, right? There's very, very few of them, and they are freak athletes. I think beyond just the 5'6" person, it's important to remember every single professional athlete is a freak athlete of some kind. There's nobody who gets to that level who is not a 1% of a 1%. What I believe athletics can teach, and it sounds like your book professes, is that you are allowed in an environment to show that you can do the best you can and rise above realistic pressure. And whether you win or lose on the scoreboard, that doesn't necessarily mean you had a good day. I've seen some teams win national championships, and they didn't actually maximize their value for whatever reason. They had so much talent, but even then, you're like, man, they still could have done more. And then I've seen teams and I've coached teams, just like I'm sure you have, maybe won one game, maybe didn't win any games all season, but boy, if they didn't do the best they could with what they had. And those are the life lessons that I think us as coaches should be really teaching. That if you are super talented, uber talented, and you have the genetics, and I guess if you have the financial means and the pay to play, maximize that. But if you don't, just do the best you can with what you have, and you'll be a lifelong fan of sports in whatever capacity that can be. So anyway, that's just my philosophy. It sounds like co-aligned with what you're talking about. If we could just pick on one recent success story you may have had through your interactions with the book, whether it's a student that you had long ago or a player you had long ago or recent, that came back and said, hey, coach, thank you so much. That was so valuable to me. or someone new who didn't know who you were, who picked up the book and then went out of their way to send you a comment, whether it was on Amazon, with the reviews, or send you a private email. What is maybe one success story or a few success stories that you're finding through this book that you've written?
I I think I found throughout my teaching and coaching and education career that that was one of the most valuable things that I always loved about my job, and I felt like I was always passionate about everything. But when somebody would just say a nice word to you about making an impact on their life or their sport, or making them be a better student or whatever, it was always very impactful. And as far as the book's concerned, I have had a few kind of interesting situations. And amazingly, one of my student athletes from 45 years ago, actually saw it online and reached out to me and said, Coach Morris, I can't believe I came across this and that you have written this book. This is amazing. And he just was so excited and happy for me and thought it was very cool. And then also it just meant a lot to me, because he was like, the things that you used to teach us way back when, are emphasized in the book, and he indicated that he would never forget those. So that was pretty rewarding to hear that. And if you don't mind me telling the story, I'll try to keep it short. But my dad went to Duke and played baseball at Duke, and I've become a crazy Duke fanatic. And have always followed them. And as I mentioned earlier, I became a big Coach K fan when I first started coaching in the 70s, and especially in the 80s when he started coaching at Duke. But I actually wrote him a letter and sent him a copy of my book. Now, who am I to send Coach K a copy of my book when he's written numerous books, and I've read 3 of his books? But I was talked into it by my wife and 2 sisters, and they were like, send him a book and tell him about Dad's story. So I sent him a letter and told him that my dad had played baseball there and was the captain of the 1941 team, and he just had an unbelievable experience at Duke, and passed it on to me that Duke was just unbelievable, and that's why I became a big fan. And then also he had been asked when he played, he was the captain of the team, but the coach had asked him to stay on and possibly be an assistant coach, and he wanted to do it. But in 1941, World War II was just beginning, and that's when he graduated and he enlisted into the Navy, and he wasn't able to pursue a career in coaching at Duke. And so Coach K, when I told him all about that, and I had heard that he was really good about responding to people and just really kind to reaching out to many, many people about different things. And he actually sent me a letter back within a week and said, thank you so much for the book. It was such a nice gift, and very impressed with it, and I'm going to have my 2 grandkids read it. And then he went on and just said that it was so enjoyable to read about my dad's story and great experience there. And then because he was a military person and started coaching at West Point himself, he was like, and I thank your dad for his service, to the United States and in the Navy. And to get a letter from Coach K, which is right on the wall in front of me right now, was just the coolest thing. And not that I knew him personally, but it just meant a lot that he was kind enough to reach out, and knew that my dad's experience and story was very big, and that I was nice enough to send him a copy. So those are just a few things.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I think one of the phrases that's triggering in my head as you tell that whole story is readers are leaders. It's a phrase that my wife has often quoted that her father had taught her. And my parents also made sure that reading was a very important part of my life. And that goes beyond, again, the athletic prowess, right? If I can read the playbook, if I can read the manual, if I can find insightful pieces of information through the written word, I'm more likely to succeed when I have to put it into action, right? And so it sounds like you're trying to do that with this book. You're trying to get this in the hands and into the eyes and into the feelings of the reader. You want to get people to read through your experience. Because the one thing that we as coaches know is we can't teach experience. We can express it. We can tell people, what this is. But the only thing that truly allows somebody to learn is through experience. So my understanding would be that through this book, you have tried to condense down your experience so that people can digest it. And if they can digest it, they can act on it. And so that's what I'm hearing through what you're saying. And then also, we admire people who inspire us. And so if you admire Coach K, then your inspiration continues, right? And that's the inspiration that you gave to one of your students, 45 years ago.
Yeah.
My belief is that there's universal truths that regardless of any sort of belief system you may have, there are just things that are absolutely true, such as if you work hard, you're going to get something in return, right? And that's a non-negotiable on anything in life. And if you have intelligence and you work hard, boy, the whole world can be opened up at your oyster, right? Or as your oyster. What is another universal truth, or what are some other universal truths that you feel you've found through your career and experience, and that you would love to see the next generation of families that are coming through, the college athlete experience to understand as they start to navigate that world?
When I decided to write this book, I wanted to try to keep it very simple and make it kind of a handbook or a guide for student athletes and parents and coaches and administrators to possibly advise. So it was written in a format where it was 15 chapters, nice short, sweet chapters with a lot of very important concepts and facts, and then also a lot of examples of my experiences in different situations. And it goes back to the question that you asked, is I just wanted to help student athletes and parents and coaches, everybody, to kind of come up with a plan for helping student athletes to plan for the future. And if they wanted to play high school sports, after playing youth sports, or go on to college, or, even though there might be a very slim chance of people making it in the pros, and as you mentioned, those are super athletes and the exceptional athletes, that they could have a nice solid plan that would help them to be as successful as possible in school, in athletics. And if things don't work out like they thought things were going to work out as far as planned, or by getting a scholarship or going to college and playing college sports or going on to the pros, that they would still learn a lot about life. And I think those are the biggest things that people don't really understand, is that you have so much to learn from playing sports that, and I know it's kind of a old saying that, and some people are like, well, life is like sports and sports are like life, but it is true. And you can learn so much about it, that about life, by just experiencing and playing sports and going through the ups and downs and so forth. So I think the book was intended to help people make that plan, but also to have resources available and, a strategy that they could come up with to handle mental health issues, or, for strength and conditioning, or, being good in the community, like your company is. One of the chapters is on community service and trying to tell athletes that that's a very important thing to get involved with, that would really help them as a person and help them be, a better athlete, and help them in so many ways, through this whole process, and especially later in life. But
You write 33% of college students experience depression or anxiety, but only 10% seek help. When you see those numbers, where's the breakdown to you? Fear, stigma, or a lack of systems?
the mental side of sports has always fascinated me, and I don't proclaim, or did not proclaim when I was a coach, that I knew all the mental part of it and the emotional part of it. But you always would try to get into somebody's head. You would always try to figure them out, what's going on emotionally, psychologically, and so forth with people, and try to be able to read people. And I think good coaches, good teachers, and people that are good leaders can do those type of things better than others. But one of the things, regarding that statement, is that, I became so much more aware of the mental health issues. And obviously over the last, let's say, 20 years or so, unfortunately, there's been some very sad cases where high school, college athletes have taken their life because of too much pressures, too many expectations on them, and especially youth and student athletes that, there's nothing wrong with, having these mental health challenges. And I think when you have these superstar people come out, obviously, people are going to look at them like, wow, these things really happen to everybody. And for them to, tell their story and to reach out to people to help them, I think is just, amazing, and just can make such a big impact. And those stats that you just read off and that I had found and put in the book, I think it does come down to really all three of the things you mentioned. I mean, people are fearful of not succeeding and being successful. They don't want that stigma of people looking at them as being unsuccessful or weak or not strong, or they can't handle tough situations. And then also just the lack of systems, support systems out there. And I think finally, in education and in sports and other fields, that people are providing so many more services and support systems for people, realizing that there are a lot of people that have these mental and emotional issues, and sometimes they're scared. As I said, only 10% of the people reach out for help, and that something has to be done about it. So you have to commend those people for everything that they've done, especially the famous ones. But anybody that can tell a story that makes an impact on somebody else, I think will really be helpful. And as a coach, I've had ups and downs, and I won't deny that I haven't had some emotional challenges where it gets to you. I mean, you do everything you can to help others, but sometimes coaches don't even know how to help themselves. Mm-hmm. You can really help other people, but sometimes, and one of the phrases, a simple phrase, but something that I just feel like it makes sense, is that if you tell people that you're not the only one that has these issues, and that it's okay to not be okay. Mm-hmm. That little phrase really hit me when I read it one time in my research. And when you think about that, it's okay. It's not that big a deal if you're going through some, tough times mentally and emotionally, and it's going to be okay at some point. And being able to make other people feel that. But I think the fear and the stigma and the lack of support systems in the past are now improving. Let's just say that people are being able to handle those better now.
Yeah. When you say pressure and expectations are too much for a lot of the athletes, it just makes me think about it almost feels like the weight of the world's on your shoulders and you feel alone, right?
Yeah,
It's one thing to be, there to take the penalty kick in the championship game. And, of course, you're going to remember that moment forever, whether you put it in the net or you don't. And I think that's one of the things that as a coach, have always tried to navigate and help the players, and I'm sure the same for you, which is it's either going to go in or it's not. As long as you did the best with it, if it's an amazing save, if, the ball hits the post, there's luck involved in sports. Luck is a major, major, major component of sports. But you can control your effort, you can control your focus, and hopefully the enough if you want to be in that moment, right? If you want to take that pressure on, you don't feel fully alone in
yeah,
taking that penalty kick. That I think, as I say that, I think of you see the tennis players now, the top tennis players in the world, and every single one of them, when they win their tournament or they lose their tournament, it's the unique sport where the champion and the runner-up always have to give a speech after the match,
mm,
and the first thing they do is they thank their team.
yeah,
And the first thing that the uh, opponent says in that speech too is they congratulate not just their direct opponent on the court, but their team, the opponent's team.
yeah,
So
mm,
even in a very isolating sport like tennis, people I think are feeling more and more support. There's more and more mental health awareness and more outreach. So, we're asking that question in 2025. 33% of college students experience the depression or the anxiety, 10% seek help. If we can improve that 1% even every year, and then those numbers don't go backwards, that's improvement. And, and a book like yours, I think, goes a long way towards helping that. Yeah, just my take on that. Now,
yeah.
there's some other new things happening in terms of sports and beyond just the NIL and the amount of money involved. Uh, you got Caitlin Clark, the newest icon for not just women athletes, but just young athletes, period.
Yeah.
How is a coach, how is a school preparing that kind of a player, that special player for that level of spotlight? Because that's still an 18, 19, 20, 21-year old, and that's a
Yeah.
kid. I'm old enough now to really recognize that's a kid.
Yeah.
For women, they're breaking ground. They really haven't had anybody before. Cheryl Miller was not at the level of Caitlin Clark in terms of popularity,
Yeah.
and pressure and financial gain. Um, if you were to navigate an athletic department today, what are you doing? What's maybe the first step you're taking towards supporting not only that athlete, but that coach who has to help that athlete, right? That trickle down effect of it. What is the first step you're doing?
You talk about somebody like Caitlin Clark. I mean, she has done a terrific job of, bringing the status of women's sports to another level. And that's not to say other women haven't done that in the past, but she and many, many other current college and now professional athletes are really raising the level and attention to women's sports. But I think as far as an administrator or coach, you really maybe need to focus on providing what we were talking about before, support services for them, and maybe talking about how they need to handle social media and some of the negative things that go through social media. And as as much good as Caitlin Clark has done for the game, she's also had a lot of very negative things that have happened to her personally. social media wise, and many of them have. And it's mentioned in the social media chapter, that in the book too. And I think that you have to provide some kind of education for parents, student athletes themselves, coaches, administrators on just maybe having some of these type of well-known people come in and speak to your people, or showing them a video about Caitlin Clark and Kevin Love or somebody, about their challenges, and letting them know, and really having some kind of program to put in place. And if I was an AD now, I feel like I would try to do that type of thing where you would have a handbook and, special, um, you know, um, conferences and symposiums and just meetings and videos and different things to bring it to not only their attention but to promote talking among student athletes and coaches themselves on how they can best handle these situations. And then the biggest thing is how you can identify different situations. And sometimes I kick myself when in the past, I should have been aware of, one of my athletes, seemed to be down a little, and you might have tried to talk to them a little and get some information from them, but maybe I didn't really understand fully what they were going through, and kind of wish you had, you know, had some better ways to be able to try to provide, help for them, and to just make them aware that you're always there, which I've always done as far as a teacher and coach, but you just maybe can really even tell them that you have these certain support services at your school, or at your college, or professional help, and books to read, and other things that could really help them out. And it's just so much that goes into it. It's sometimes it's overwhelming, but sometimes they don't, people that are going through it just don't know where to go. And just having a person that can listen and help guide them with some different ideas and ways to go, and tell them about all the services, so that when an athlete goes to high school or college, and it's mentioned in the book, I mean, ahead of time, they should know who they need to go to get and seek help. And that's one of the things that I enjoyed most about being a professor and a teacher and a coach, was I was also an academic advisor. And you meet with them on a frequent basis to talk about courses and classes, but also even to just see how things are going personally, and just making them aware of, come and see me. But if I can't really give you the answers, we have some other services here at school that you can go to talk to them. But it's a challenge, but you have to help in the whole education process, really.
Which is hard for
Hard.
coach. It's hard for, I think, coaches who, they represent a financial value to these schools. Some of them are the highest paid, state employees, more than the governor and the president of the
Yeah,
college. And we all know that they're not getting paid that money based on the graduation rate or the GPA of their teams.
that's true.
They're getting paid on the wins and the losses. And so to to tell a coach that your primary job is, like you mentioned, two coaches that won a lot, John Wooden and Mike Krzyzewski, uh, to see the long game, right? That I'm not just trying to win here on the court, but that's going to just be a manifestation of us winning off the court. That's going to be us, doing day in, day out, the little things correctly. I think there's a lot of coaches that just don't see that. I think a lot of college coaches in particular, having been around them for as long as I have, there's a lot of used car salesmen out there. A lot of them, more so than I think less. So, well, you're talking about again educating that student athlete to be prepared in the pitfalls. It would be nice to see the coaches themselves be rewarded for GPA, be rewarded for, academic achievement. It might be a pipe dream that never happens because, that's just the way our American society is. But I think that would probably be something that actually would help is to do it that way. But I'm a realist, and I see
Yeah.
what the real thing is. But again, if you're a real teacher, if you're a real coach, then I think you do see that it's
Oh, I agree.
we're gonna win on the court based on a lot of different factors. But I want you to win off the court. I want you to have a healthy life. I want you to treat your teammates with respect. I want you to treat your classmates with respect. And again, that's hard if the coach themselves, the person they look up to, doesn't have those values. So I think it's very important the coaches, pick up this book that you have, or athletic administrators pick up this book that you have and see the values that are being taught there. Because I think, coach, if you were all about wins and losses, that person wouldn't reach out 45 years later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're reaching out because you meant something on a deep core human level to them. So that's to use a financial phrase, my 2 cents on that topic.
No, it should be worth more than that. You got the right philosophy and attitude. No, that's what it should be, but we're going in many different directions now.
Now, you talk about another serious topic, which goes back to coaches and administrators and the guidance and the very powerful time that they have with these students. Hazing, bullying, and the team culture that comes with that. We've seen even high-profile cases at some of the best academic institutions that
Yeah,
not only the U.S. has to offer, but the world, in Northwestern and Harvard. When you
yeah.
hear the stories, is it a failure of leadership, education, accountability? Where is the failure happening when that happens?
I know it's very sad and it's been around forever and ever, but we don't seem to be really addressing it. And it still continues to go on. And that's why when I was going through the topics and concepts that I wanted to focus on to come up with my chapters, I was like, hazing and bullying is one that has to be in there. And, it's first of all, I think they need to have classes and seminars and written in the handbook about rules and regulations about things you can do and you cannot do. But people have to understand the danger of hazing and bullying and picking on kids and the kinds of disastrous things that it's caused. And it comes down to once again educating everybody, but also not just talking about it one time and putting it in a book. I mean that's nice, and you have it in writing, and it's out there so people should know that it's important. But really talking about it and talking about, as you mentioned, some of these very sad stories at Northwestern and Harvard and so many other colleges and high schools where they've had very serious tragedies where student athletes have died, never mind fraternity things and so forth. And it's just not only educating them, but following up, having consequences for people that are participating in it. And yes, a lot of sports teams like to have initiation rights, and as a freshman you have to do this and that to be accepted and received by the team, but it can't go beyond serious details, and that's why in the book it gives a specific definition of what bullying is and what hazing is, and the coaches can't turn their heads when they maybe have a sense of something, or they can see maybe kids being picked on by others, and maybe yeah they think it's just kidding and just you know a fun team thing and so forth, but they don't really realize what's going on and what might be going through the head of that one person who's being picked on and bullied. And they have to take it seriously. And you made a good point. Coaches have so many, not just at the high school or college level, but even youth level, you have so many responsibilities that sometimes it's just so many different things you have to do, but that's your job. And you have to be aware of these things. And you don't want something really bad to happen and you be held responsible, which would be really a bad situation, or just realize that something happened under your watch or under your guidance that you really maybe should have known more about. I mean, I mentioned that I felt like I should have been on top of things a little bit more. They weren't really, really serious issues, but they were just things that maybe I should have realized that the student was going through some tough times at home. And, I could have helped them more and in a different way. But sometimes I unfortunately think some coaches, administrators just turn their head from it. And I'm not saying all of them, because a
Sure.
lot of people do a really, really good job and they're on top of those things. But you just have to be aware of these things. And if you're really close with the players and know your team, you should be able to keep up with most of these things. So,
I think it goes back to caring about the correct things, right? And
right,
caring about the person first. I
definitely.
was lucky enough when I was starting out my career. I met a coach. He was a professional player out of Portugal for soccer, and he said, "Create better players before athletes." And that just, you always hear that one quote that you can always go back to, and
Yeah,
that's in my core of my DNA. And that's what I think you're speaking to is it is your job too, right? And that's the tough balance. We ask educators, whether they're, sports educators or classroom educators in math or science or English, to do so much more than just the subject matter.
right.
And that also goes back to the American society we've created, and where your book is not just for one particular subset of people in this ecosystem, but the student athlete, the parent, the coach, the athletic administrator, and the community, right? The broader scope community. What is the community value? What is the college value? And if you can learn those top, words or phrases that the community values or the college values, then I think you're on your direct path, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You can get confused very, very quickly and very, very easily, especially on a college campus where, you look to your left and it's, the cafeteria's, got free food coming out, and you look to your right and there's a party happening down the street and you look up and you're like, oh, I should be in class right now,
Yeah,
and then I've also got to get sleep and I've also got to go play my sport. And I chose this city for a reason. I want to see what the city has to offer, right?
definitely.
So
Right.
it's very, very hard to manage. It's very, very hard to navigate. But again, having a guidebook helps, and just having something that keeps you grounded, keeps you together. So, well, I want to thank you so much for the time here. I got some fun questions here. We're always going to
Okay.
end with some positivity. And again, it's very important that the tenor of this entire talk with you is, yes, there are problems. We've identified the problems. We also, the people that really make an impact are those that provide solutions. It's very, very easy to identify a problem. That's the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
We all can see when the car crashed into the side of the road. What are we doing to solve that problem? The car already crashed. Could we have prevented that in the first place? Okay, let's take a look at that. In the moment, is the paramedics on site? Is the ambulance on site? Are people doing what they can to support? And so I know that's kind of a dark, comparison, but what I'm getting at is you're somebody that has identified problems and you're providing solutions basically before they become a problem. And preventative medicine is the best medicine that you can possibly take, right? And so that's what I think your book represents and what you represent. All right, here we go. 10 seconds or less, Dave. Let's have some fun here. One quality every successful student athlete must have.
Well, I'm big on qualities, and John Wooden's pyramid of success, but I would say resilience. A student athlete has to be very, very resilient,
Okay.
be able to bounce back from things.
I love that. Grit, determination, right? Synonyms for that. Great.
Yeah.
Um, if you could coach one current college athlete, who would it be?
Well, I'm going to cheat a little because he did leave, but I'm still saying Cooper Flagg's still in college, and even though gone to the NBA, but I just was totally amazed by what an all-around person and player, and I just was blown away since I'm such a big Duke fan. I would have loved to have coached that kid, and not that he was so well coached by his parents and everybody anyway, but I just would have loved to be around him.
I am a big basketball head. That's my first love, that sport. I got to see him play last year in person. And I got to watch the Duke UNC game, just like analyzing him. I think his basketball IQ is what makes him special. There's a lot of 6'9" guys out there playing
Yeah.
in the NBA. It's the correct play every single time.
Oh,
And then you
definitely.
heard no controversy, like you said, off the court about him. And he just turned 18. Like
I
he
know.
was a true, like he's a true phenom. If he stays healthy, yeah, I feel the same. He seems special. So
I agree.
thanks for that. What's one thing you'd tell every high school freshman athlete?
Academics is first.
What's a book besides your own you think every young athlete should read?
I've come across a couple books since I've written my book, and there's one that's really very good called Mental Toughness for Student Athletes. I think it's excellent.
And then your favorite sports movie ever?
I would say, even though I have a bunch of them, I would say Remember the Titans. I just thought that was a very cool movie. Taught a lot of different things about, different aspects of life. And I don't want to say that I taught in a situation that was exactly like the high school that it was, but when I first started teaching in Georgia, the school system was kind of the same as far as you had your predominantly white schools, predominantly inner city black schools, and it's coming together. I was at a high school where they were starting to merge together, and to a small degree, not like the Remember the Titans, but I was able to see that. So everything that I saw in that movie was like really like real to me because I had seen that before. So
That's awesome. Dave, this was fantastic. Coach, this was fantastic. Your work is exactly what our world needs right now, the bridge between competition and compassion. For anyone listening, Student Athletes Control Your Destiny is available now on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble. Whether you're a player, coach, or parent, it's a must read for understanding how to thrive in sports and in life. Dave, thank you so much for your time.
Zach, thank you very much. And once again, I've been so impressed with your company and keep up the good work. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And I'd love to maybe do some other things with you in the future. So thank you very much.